So I've been wanting to do this video for a long time now. So Zaiden is 20 weeks old today, and I've been wanting to film this video since about 10 weeks old. So I'm finally getting around to doing it, and I thought, what is more fitting than filming this in his nursery that he's still yet to come home to. I think this is going to be probably one of the hardest videos I have ever had to film. Not that I have to, but I just feel like I'm ready to share Zaiden's story. So, pull up a chair, grab your cuppa, and let's chat. So, Zaiden James Darble, born on the 18th of the 4th, 2020, weighing 2.74 kilos, or exactly, I think that worked out to be exactly 6 pounds, and 46 centimeters long. Little tiny bubba. I was 39 weeks and 1 day pregnant. I was induced. The doctor that was first looking after my case was going to let me go all the way through to 40 weeks, and on 40 weeks, if I hadn't given birth yet, she was going to induce me the next day. But for some reason, another doctor took over my case, had a look, and decided that Zaiden needed to come out. So I had low pap A in my placenta, and Zaiden had a 2-vessel cord. He was measuring 34 weeks at my 38-week scan. So they called me on the Friday night when I was exact 39 weeks, and they asked me to come in on the Saturday to be induced at 10 a.m. So of course I couldn't sleep that night because I was panicking. And then we got in and had Zaiden, which I will launch into my birth story another day, but this one is all about Zaiden. So Zaiden made his entrance into the world at 3:01 p.m. He was struggling to breathe, so he was blue. He was struggling to breathe, and they couldn't get his sugars up. So he had aspirated meconium, which is the baby's first poo. So he'd done that poo in the womb, and he then inhaled that as he came out. So they thought, at first they thought that that was the only issue. So they took him from me. I held him for 2 seconds. Justin didn't even get to hold him. They took him from me. They gave him oxygen in the resus bay beside us. Then he was wheeled to special care nursery with Justin. And then they couldn't get his sugars up. So they gave him a bolus. It's called a bolus of, I think it was glucose or I think it was glucose, glucosamine. So they gave him a bolus to get his sugars up, and they got him stable. So he was born at 3:01 p.m. We got wheeled over there. I finally came out of birth suite at 6 p.m. To go to 2D. I put my bags down. So it had been 3 hours-ish since I'd seen him. I put my bags down in 2D. I walked over to special care nursery, and they were still having troubles getting his sugars up at that stage. So then they gave him the bolus, did another sugar reading, and everything was okay and stable. But because of that specific issue, they had to transfer him to another hospital. So by the time they got organised, it was about 10-11 p.m. I had been given a crash course in afterbirth. So, I mean, I already knew what to expect after giving birth because I've had Kyra. I was given a crash course, and then I was discharged from the hospital, and Zaiden was transferred over to the Royal Women's Hospital in Brisbane. He was transferred on his own. they didn't have any space for me to stay, so I had to be discharged to then go and see him if I wanted to. So being 11 p.m. at night, I made the really tough decision to actually just stay home that night. So I slept not very well, and then the next morning I was awake at 6 o'clock and we went straight into the Royal Women's. Now at this stage only one parent was allowed in at a time, but because it was our first time seeing him after giving birth basically, we were allowed in the room together. And then that's when everything started. So he was on the CPAP machine to put positive pressure into his lungs because he was struggling to breathe, so that helps to clear the lungs. He then was still a bit funny with his sugars, so at this point we hadn't been able to latch him on the breast. He was struggling with his sugars. They were only giving him basically sugar water through a drip, so he had a drip in one hand. He had a drip in one hand, and he also had a line in his belly button. So before a belly button heals, obviously there's like a vein that runs through it, so they put a line straight in there to give him what he needs. Yeah, so wow, looking back on photos, he was so little. So he also had an orogastric tube. So at the moment he's got a nasogastric and a TPT all in one nostril. So the nasogastric goes through to his tummy, and then the TPT goes through to the it's called a transpyloric tube. So it goes through to the pylorus. So at this time he had a drip in one hand, an orogastric tube, a CPAP mask, a line in his belly button. It was so much to deal with. Like, mind you, I'd just given birth as well, so my hormones were out of whack. I was hand expressing colostrum for him, which was just going straight through the orogastric tube. So that first day that he was born, we didn't get to hold him. So we didn't get to hold him until he was 2 days old, when he finally had the CPAP mask taken off. So he had the CPAP mask taken off. 2 days later, we gave him a cuddle finally. His first breastfeed was at 4 days old, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 5 days old. So we finally were able to breastfeed on the 5th day, and things were going really well. So we got out of the NICU on day 7, and then I got a phone call on the 7th night that he was in special care nursery. So we didn't go home from NICU, we went from NICU to special care nursery, and I got a phone call on the 7th night, and I was told that he was put on oxygen. So between coming off CPAP, it took 7 days for him to need oxygen again. So they told me that they'd taken an x-ray of his chest and it looked like he had fluid on his lungs. Our question was, would there still be meconium in there? Their answer was no, because he's had plenty of time on the CPAP. He's had plenty of antibiotics that would get rid of any sort of infection, blah, 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 blah. So then we had, on the 5th day he had an echo on his heart, and they found a 4mm VSD, ventricular septal defect. Now in a baby's heart, a baby of Zaiden's size, a 4mm hole is considered a large hole. So they found the hole on the 5th day. We got transferred to the special care nursery on the 7th day, and then he went on oxygen on the 7th night or the 8th day, whichever one it was. So they took the x-ray of the lungs, found fluid on the lungs. So the question was the hole in the heart causing hypertension in the lungs, or was there something wrong with his lungs causing the fluid on the lungs? So that's when all the tests started. They tested for pneumonia, they tested for lung diseases. The respiratory team from the Queensland Children's Hospital came to visit at the Royal, and the doctor sat me down and started talking about this thing called interstitial lung diseases. So I'm like, okay, what's this? So instead of asking what it was, I googled it and completely threw myself off, completely. I was so scared that he had an interstitial lung disease, because the first one that popped up pretty much said that he wouldn't live past 3 months old. Good Lord. That was the scariest time of my life. So prior to all of this lung disease stuff, they sent off 2 lots of blood work. They sent off a karyotype and they sent off a microarray. Now, karyotype checks his chromosomes to make sure that he's got the right amount of chromosomes, and the microarray actually breaks down every single chromosome to see if anything's missing. So within each chromosome there's multiple genes, and I'm not going to get into it because this will be a very long video, because I'm going to have to do this video in 2 parts. There's a lot to chat about. So while we sent away the karyotype, that came back all good. He had 24 chromosomes, or 23 chromosomes, and a X and Y, like the sex chromosome. Then the microarray was a 4 to 6 week wait. So we were in the special care nursery at the Royal Women's Hospital for about 4 or 5 weeks. And then we were transferred from the Royal back to the Logan Hospital, because we thought that now that we had sent away all these tests, we were just waiting. We were going to go home on oxygen. He was still stable. Like, we were just slowly moving forward. So the highest weight he got up to at the Royal Women's Hospital was about 2.8, 2.9 kilos. And it would fluctuate. It would go up 80 grams and then it would drop by 100, and then it would go up 30 grams, and then we would go up 20 grams, and then we would drop 70. Like, I was on the edge of my seat every weigh in, and we were weighing every friggin' day. No, every second day I think it was. So such huge weight fluctuations should have been a trigger. It should have triggered something in the doctors or the nurses or somebody to say, actually, this isn't right. Something's not right here. They still kept taking x-rays of his lungs. They never changed. They were always looking fluid filled. He was on the tiniest little whiff of oxygen, 0.125, which is like an eighth of oxygen. So the tiniest little sniff, and he was saturating beautifully. But as soon as we take that away from him, his saturations would drop. So that's the amount of oxygen in your blood. So we were transferred then from the Royal with no answers, except for the fact that he had all of his chromosomes. We were transferred from the Royal back to Logan to wait for the next lot of results to come in, which was the microarray. So while we were waiting for results, we were transferred back to Logan. So Zaiden's biggest issue at the beginning, there was a few issues. So one of the issues was his work of breathing. So that's when he was having recessions under his rib cage, like sucking in when he was breathing. So he was working really hard to breathe, like struggling to breathe. And that sort of never got better, no matter what we did, regardless of the amount of oxygen we gave him, regardless of anything. So we were transferred back to Logan, and another issue was his weight gain. Like, he just couldn't gain weight. So the theory was that he was working so hard to breathe, he was working so hard to, his heart was working really hard, his lungs was making him struggle, he was just fighting. He was fighting to live. So your iPad's in your bedroom.
I just want to know where it is, but can I give you a little hug?
Hurry up.
I missed you today.
I didn't go anywhere today.
I miss you.
I didn't go anywhere for you to miss me.
I missed you the other day.
Okay, go and find your iPad, please. Thank you. Go and find your iPad, okay?
Keep Carol Zaiden in your heart and Beth in your heart.
Always.
Okay, just look at her always up to the sky.
Thank you. Go and do your iPad in your room, please.
Okay.
Shut the door.
Okay, I'm just going to shut it that bit.
Thank you. While we were waiting for those results of the microarray, we were trying to do all of the things. Then one Sunday, I remember it was Sunday, I remember clear as day. I don't know for what reason I didn't go in, but I wasn't there for some reason. Anyway, I know whether it was a night, Sunday night maybe, because I still, by this stage, I had not stayed with my baby. I have not still stayed overnight with my baby. I have not had a chance to stay overnight. So Sunday night, he had a bad night. He was vomiting. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was always vomiting. Well, not always, but like he vomited quite frequently, and he was like a refluxy baby. So they had the bed up on an angle, but when he vomited, it was quite mucusy. Like it was not quite right. It was never really milk, it was just mucus. So that was weird. And I was like, what's going on? So the doctors at Logan were always conferring with the doctors and the fellows at the Children's Hospital, the Queensland Children's Hospital. And so they're always talking, always conferring with each other, always making sure that they're doing the right thing. And unfortunately, Zaiden was just too complex to be at our local hospital. So on that Sunday night in particular, they were conferring with the fellows. They were trying to figure out what to do. He'd had another X-ray on his chest. Nothing had changed. Lungs were still murky, but he was now desaturating while on oxygen, no matter how much they were giving him. So they decided to start this medication called Lasix. So Lasix is a diuretic. It helps draw the fluid out of the body and you wee it out basically. A lot of heart kids are on it because some of the heart defects that you can have can cause the fluid to build up in the body. And so anyway, Zaiden started a course of Lasix. He went into isolation on that Sunday night because they weren't sure if he had COVID-19. So they did the swab for that. They gave him the Lasix. They did a blood test to make sure that there was no underlying infection. Again, they ran a course of antibiotics to see whether that was like something hidden. Eventually, his microarray results came back, and it turned out that Zaiden has a gene deletion. So the gene deletion that Zaiden has is called a UBE2A gene deletion. It's very rare. At that time, there was about 12 reported cases in the world, and I didn't know where to go from there. I was sort of relieved when they told us because we'd sent away the testing for the interstitial lung diseases. And so when we found out that he had this gene deletion, we ended up asking the question like, could he still have an interstitial lung disease? And the general consensus was that he would be super unlucky to have 2 gene deletions because an interstitial lung disease is a genetic thing. So it gave me a little bit of relief. At the same time, still on edge because we were still waiting for results. So the gene deletion that Zaiden has a multitude of issues, but it ties in together everything that he has. So he's got a hole in his heart. And then he has dysmorphic features, which to the untrained eye you wouldn't know because they're very subtle. So after we found that out, it was a matter of, okay, so what's next? We were like, cool, he's got a gene deletion. No worries. I did as much research as I could on it. There's not very many papers out there on it. So we found that out when he was about 7 weeks old, I think it was, 7 weeks old. Then he just fell deeper into heart failure. So it's something that happens when there's a hole or a heart defect that is just basically not making it all work. It's just not working properly. It's just not working the way it's meant to work. So we made the decision to actually be transferred to the Queensland Children's Hospital. Hey guys, so like I said in the video, I thought I might have to do this video in 2 parts because his story is quite long, and I've just finished editing the first portion of it and it's about 21 minutes long. So I'm going to stop it there and I will edit and upload the part 2, Zaiden's story part 2, soon. So thank you for watching, and I can't wait to share the rest of Zaiden's story.